Hey everybody, welcome back to another loungy style video here at Northwest Camera Co. Today, we're gonna be talking about something semi-controversial. Maybe the title in the video gave it away, but lens flares are dumb. And they're not really dumb, but to me it's very strange that anymore we've collectively been judging lenses off of lens flare, which is a characteristic of a lens. It is fun, but the whole process of judging a lens when there's so much that a lens does seems a little bit crazy when most of how we choose lenses now is based on the flare. Videos, everything that shows stuff, it's a lot of flare. I mean, hell, we do it here as well because it's what people want to see. The unfortunate part is kind of how we go about that process and why it's kind of unfair to us and to the lenses. And just want to talk a little bit about that. Like, feel free to comment below, start a conversation. Love to hear people's thoughts on it. But throughout this video, we're going to be showing some footage of lens flares, tests we've done, ShareGrid maybe, some other places. But the big thing is when you think about a beautiful, like chef's kiss lens flare, it's that perfect moment when the sun is low in the sky, shooting into it, just a big bright object right into the lens, maybe through some haze or some sort of like environmental object, which is nearly impossible to replicate in any sort of like studio or testing environment. The closest we can get is like shining a flashlight into the lens. But anymore, people are choosing lenses based on a flare property. What I find really interesting about this is that in 10 years of shooting, longer than that now, but the times in which you were shooting into that perfect flare environment where you were getting the most beautiful flare that any of a lens has to offer is such a small fraction of the time, maybe less than 1%. So why are we judging lenses or choosing lenses based on something that happens so infrequently? I really don't know either, and that's why I'm making this video, because I'd love to hear some feedback. It's also interesting with things like anamorphic lenses in studio settings. A lot of times we're using flashlights, which are very pinpointed, harsh, usually blue light sources. So when people are like, oh, those flares are overly saturated, I don't like the way that lens looks, it's kind of unfair that we're doing tests this way, because if you were to take the lens out and shoot it into a beautiful sunset, which is like when you're going to be doing that, those two things couldn't look more different. Now I do get sometimes you're in a dark environment, somebody's got a flashlight moving around, but also that happens very infrequently. When was the last time you were on a shoot where like the creative was somebody walking through a dark area with a flashlight? It does come up from time to time, and maybe in that time you could sub in a lens that flares less or flares more, but the times in which you're just shining a bright object into the lens happens very infrequently. Narrative, commercial, maybe music video, you do get a lot of that type of situation, but we've moved away from these beautiful like tungsten fixtures and into LED, which just in general has a more saturated light source when you're talking about how the flares react. And that has made a pretty significant change in how the lenses look and feel on camera. So in general, this video is more here to ask the question of why are flares the more important part of a lens's aesthetic formula when there's things like fall off and color reproduction and focus and continuity. Why is it that the flares are the things that people want the most when the other aspects is what you're seeing 99% of the time, performance like breathing and chromatic aberration performance and off-axis light sources? I do think it's important to show how lenses react to bright sources shot into them, but the way in which we go about that is a little bit interesting nowadays with how we shoot videos online and show things, reproduce them in studios. So you never reproduce the sun. I don't care what you want to do. Shooting into the sun is its own look, and when lenses flares look the absolute most beautiful. So, when you're going about looking at lenses and you see tests online, maybe our test, maybe anyone's tests really, if somebody's shining a flashlight into a lens, maybe don't be so harsh or quick to judge what a flare might look like, because 9 times out of 10, it's not really the most optimum way of seeing how a lens performs, because that's not really something that's gonna happen very often. And it's unfortunate, like here in Seattle, I wish we could go take every lens set and go blast a beautiful sunset, but it rains here a lot, it's not very sunny a lot, and also the times in which that happens is far into the day and it's just not practical for us to go shoot tests at that time of day. So, you know, when you're looking at lenses, really pay attention to the focus fall off, the out of focus texture, quality of texture, you know, how fast the lenses open up to, chromatic aberration, breathing, all things that make up an aesthetic whole. Maybe put less focus on how the flares are to enhance your story and more on the other parts of the lens aesthetic as a whole. It's really interesting. You start talking to people. We did this here with some people that we know. It's really interesting to hear people who are viewers and their perspective, not DPs. Because a lot of times when I'm watching stuff with my wife or even my mom, my dad, a lens flare is something that pulls somebody out of the story. And it's really interesting because watching this, I know it's coming, I can see it, I'm just waiting for somebody to say something. And if a lot of people are feeling this way, taking you out of that story for a moment, why are we as DPs putting so much emphasis on the flare again when that's something that looks cool for us and might differentiate our visual aesthetic as shooters, but is something that is semi-detrimental to a viewer's experience? And I think that is the balance we're always trying to find, is how can a lens's aesthetic help tell the story and immerse us in the story without taking the viewer out of the story? And with that, I just want to open this up to tons of comments because I'd love to hear people's feedback. I have my own thoughts. Everyone has thoughts, and I'd love to engage with as many people as possible on just how you view flares and why they're important to you. And if you think there's something that we're missing here, is why they're viewed as so important versus the other aspects of a lens. With that, I will leave camera and go drink more whiskey. So thanks for watching. Catch you next time.